Well, hopefully, Kelly, you guys can see a
Yes.
start of a presentation here. Without boring everybody to tears, I figured I would just use this as a template to kind of walk through to orient the business of KCAS. With that in mind, we've got a few slides here, so I want to jump right in case there's some questions. And by all means, if there are questions, let me know as we move through. But as Kelly said, the history of the company, I'll just move on here. Really started out as Kansas City Analytical Services. Let me see if I can get rid of this thing here. There we go. But really kind of to talk about it today, before we really jump into the history, today we've been on the move quite a bit from the organization. As everybody knows, the CRO industry is having strong market conditions, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a few minutes. But really, when I joined the organization, I really wanted to take advantage of the market and build a team that could really, become a player in the industry and not just, do okay, but really take advantage of the market and really challenge ourselves to kind of move the organization into a whole different paradigm than where it was when I joined the organization in the mid 2016. Today, we can cover the full development cycle from early discovery through registration. We can basically take on any molecule, whether it's a large molecule, through any type of technology platform. That makes us one of the rarest, if not one of arguably the only groups that can do that with the capacities and the expertise under one shop that can truly support drug development. Now, there's other organizations do that. Many times they are in separate facilities, or they claim they do it and they really just don't have the scale to pull that off. So by our metrics, we're quite unique in this area and continue to grow and experience a great demand for the business at this point in time. We do perform in a regulated environment. Our GLP is, of course, all of you know, is good laboratory practice as well as good clinical practices. And of course, if it's that early development work, most of the time that is non-regulated, but we have incredibly high standards here for our quality systems. Today, most of our work is in the large molecule arena. That was not the case when I first started here. We are simply following the market and letting the market prevail, and that has quickly moved us more into the large molecule arena. And again, we can talk about that just a little bit more, why that's happening. Today, we serve over 180 clients, and we have 100% customer retention. It's difficult for most people to be able to say that. We have a significant history, well over 40 years in the business, and that has added up to be a lot of different types of methods and capabilities and expertise developed to date. So a tremendous amount of, what we would call our own intellectual property, if you will, providing it in a service-based organization. As you can imagine, being in business well over 40 years, that we have had a significant role in over 300 drugs that have been on the market. Today, we're over 240 employees based in Kansas, Pennsylvania, and Italy. And we've been audited by the FDA 17 times. And we're anticipating one any day now. And probably one of the more looming things here of interest for us, particularly here, is that literally today I have to wrap up my office as we are anticipating moving into a brand new facility located just down the road in Olathe, Kansas. We're currently located in Shawnee, Kansas, to a new 70,000 square foot facility that'll be opening up in May. So really looking forward to getting into that new facility, provide our team the space and new facility atmosphere that they have worked so hard to deserve, and continue to support our clients. So just a little bit of glance over these 40 plus years. The business was actually started in Missouri by two gentlemen, Dr. Robert Lamb and Dr. Bill Mason. They actually started out in a very modest facility in the Quincy Research Center in Kansas City, Missouri. Over the years, they eventually kind of hopscotched, if you will, through some facilities, ending up kind of crossing the border, if you will, into Kansas. And really from there into where our current home is, which is a 33,000 square foot facility located off Shawnee Mission Parkway. Today, we actually are spread out through three facilities. The main facility is this 33,000 square foot facility, Shawnee Mission Parkway. We also have an administrative office about a block west of that houses a lot of what we call the non-revenue producing people, including myself. And then we were also by far the largest tenant today at the Kansas Bioauthority facility, if you're familiar with that, there in Olathe. So So a lot of movement there over the years, but today that's where we're currently at. And again, looking to move here shortly. A little bit of the history, Dr. Robert Lamon and Bill Mason really kind of grew the organization for approximately 20 years. And as you can imagine with that in their, with their academic professional career as long and at the same time running this type of business, they were looking at an exit, and that exit ended up being selling the company to a group called AAI, which at the time in the late 90s, early 2000s was one of the larger CROs in the industry, focused on particularly the GMP support aspects of products. Fred Sancilio and his team, quite ambitious, decided that they were going to become a one-stop shop. They started purchasing clinical groups and really were going to go to the industry and offer a one-stop shop approach. The idea of buying KCS at the time was that the bioanalytical services that they provided would support those clinical groups. Unfortunately, a fatal mistake in their strategy when AAI started to purchase intellectual property and started developing their own drugs, the industry reacted quite unfavorably to that. And essentially within just what we call a few months, had basically converted and taking all the NCEs, new chemical entities, out of the development pipeline for the CRO, and really kind of left KCS in a lurch as AAI was unable to recover. And KCS was kind of left to fend itself by taking on generic work. And in our world, that's a very cutthroat type business and high efficiency, very low price. So the entity had to basically convert, seemingly overnight to survive. And that continued for, several years of just getting by. Eventually, the AAI claimed bankruptcy, and one of the assets put on the market was KCAS. And so a lot of organizations started to take a look at it and found it in disrepair. Very little investment had been made over the years into the organization. So, significantly behind, generations behind in equipment, techniques, and so on and so forth, simply because of the decisions of AAI. That eventually led to not liking what the opportunities were. The management team, along with a local investor, started approaching other local investors. And eventually KCS came back out in late December 2009 as KCS under new ownership. Kind of came out on wobbly knees, as you can imagine, and was really trying to get back into a market. For those of us that have a little bit of gray hair on us, we also know that was right on the heels of some of the most challenging times in the CRO industry after kind of recovering from the recession at that time and the impact it had on the CRO industry and particularly the biotech community. But he continued to move forward. They hired a new CEO. For those you might recall history, Terry Osborne, who was a prominent figure, particularly in the Kansas City area, led the group for a few years. And one of the things that they appropriately did was identify the ligand binding assay, the predominant technology that serves the biologics. That's one of the areas they wanted to move into. So that was started in around 2011. And the company moved along, so to speak, at a very slow growth pace, seemingly really kind of struggling to find its way and really not making some of the changes that one might think that they would need to make to kind of put the organization back on a path to move forward. That culminated in a change. I had been working at ABC Laboratories in Columbia, Missouri, and we had sold the company. I was looking for my next opportunity. So working with the investors, they were looking for, a fresh new vision, if you will. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to take on the role in mid-2016 and was able to start to, make the investments, make the changes needed to put the organization into growth mode. From there, we've continued to be growing the company at a fairly rapid pace. And so I believe I was employee number 46 when we joined. And today we're well over 240, 250, soon to be over 300 people this year. Some of the things in particular is really rounding out the services for the company and really putting us in a position to compete and completely upgrade our instrument platforms, technologies, installing our aspects of what you have to compete in this business all across the organization. The team's done a great job, And today we're one of the more formidable operations out there offering these services. Some of the things we're very proud of is that not only were we making strides in the industry with our brand, but also internally and here locally being recognized in several instances as one of the best companies to work for in the Kansas City region. Today, again, very strong focus, particularly in the biotechs, as pharma, large pharma, continue to grow as everybody, it's not going to be a surprise to anybody. Most of our work is coming out of the major hubs, Boston, San Francisco, but we do have a heavy national presence, and we do a fair amount of international work, even though we're not focused on that up until here recently. And we'll get into more of some of the acquisitions that we just made and really what our strategy is to really become a global operation. Today, we have an exceptional commercial team that's led by Amy Mize. Some of you folks might know Amy from her days in Columbia. And we continue to grow under her leadership there and build an operations team behind that commercial development that has just really been a fantastic approach to us for the industry. And the team's done a marvelous job. These are literally just some of the comments that we're proud of that we hear all the time. Capsules, and that really is our driver, is to really be that service-oriented organization providing this type of service to the industry, which is so desperately needed. Our overall capabilities, I mentioned it earlier that we can service just about any type of molecule, whether it's a biologic, often referred to as a large molecule, or NCEs, small molecules. Small molecule was the origin of the organization because it's been around 40 years. Nobody talked about large molecule biologics, at least not in the relevant development industries, if you will. But today it's definitely a predominant demand for the business. Not many CROs can do it well. And in particular, we can do both the LBA as well as the mass spec. And often we find ourselves sitting down with the client, educating them on what maybe is their best technique. Usually they come in with expertise in one of the other types of technologies, and oftentimes they're pleasantly surprised that we can accelerate their understanding of their molecule and development by maybe switching them to another or having some type of hybrid approach, and that works well. Obviously, we still offer the small molecule work and do that quite well. But of course, as the development world continues to expand, we are rather prevalent in the offering biomarkers. And then most recently, we've made some significant investments into the areas of, I'm sure everybody hears the buzzwords of cell and gene therapies. And those are some areas that we're investing heavily in and are often running in those areas and doing quite well. Just the stats about the business, digging into this a little bit deeper. We say we're focused on the large molecules mainly because people say, well, that's the sexy way to go. But the reality is, through the development pipeline, for us, which we're particularly focused on the bioanalytical development aspects, there is just, quite frankly, more work on an apples to apples basis, if you will, supporting the large molecule versus the small molecule. So for example, the typical development work for large molecule might produce anywhere from 20 to 50% more work through that same phase. Now, obviously, that is particularly correlated with the size of the clinical programs, the number of samples and that aspects. But in general, there's just more scope to the large molecule programs. And thus for us, it creates more opportunities for revenue. Also, the large molecule in the pipeline is continually growing. Although we almost talk like small molecule, like it's a long lost cousin, the reality is the number of small molecules continue to grow in the pipeline. So we feel we're positioned very well strategically to take those on. We're relative agnostic to which the opportunities are. But again, right now, our revenues, our growth, our backlog pretty much reflects perfectly what the industry is doing out there. So today we're roughly about 3/4 large molecule that support, and that's independent. It does, that's across our LBA platforms or mass spec platforms. And the cell and gene therapy, we can see there in 2021 in that second column, if you will, we've added a significant growth in there, mainly through acquisition at this point in time, but we have started a grassroots efforts here in Kansas as well. So that area is probably one of our fastest growing areas at this point. I mentioned to you that in 2009, the company came out. I think at that point in time, the organization had about 3 mass specs that were anywhere near what we considered relevant in the industry. Today, we have 25 mass specs, top of the line. We have one remaining 4,000, which everybody, I think, still has one of those here and there. But today, we are predominantly in the 7,500 and 6,500 realm, with some stragglers in that 5,500 and 5,000. So for those of you who might know the SciEx platform, you are quickly adding the cost of that capital up in your mind. But in today's world, particularly with our focus in the protein work, we have to have the particularly that 7,500 and 6,500s to be able to service that. So a rather significant investment in our mass spec platform to really bring us up to today's standard. And what we find is that in most cases, we're pound for pound way ahead of major providers in our technology platform. Our LBA programs continue to grow rapidly. Pretty much the typical things you would expect in an area. Won't bore everybody with that type of technology, but that area continues to expand as well. And then again, our cell and gene therapy aspect is really bringing on particularly heavy focus in flow cytometry, cell sorters, but we're also quickly moving into the molecular side when we talk about PCR and some of those capabilities. Today, roughly have around 250 full-time employees. And we're starting what we call the KCAS University, which is a very strong in-house training program. And it's almost like a boot camp at this point in time. But as we're starting to scale and get larger, we've really added some significant resources to really help us move and keep up with the demand that we're seeing out in the organization. And all of that and the good work that the teams do with the scientific expertise, our backlog is growing at an incredible rate at this point in time. So the future looks very, very bright for KCS's future. We mentioned a acquisition. We recently acquired a company based out of Doylestown, Pennsylvania, which is about 20 minutes northwest of Philadelphia. For those of you maybe familiar with that area, now that's starting to become Silicon Valley, not Silicon, but Silicon. And there's just been a huge influx of money for biotech companies in that area. Obviously, the University of Pennsylvania is well known for its cell-based research and academic programs there, so rich talent base there. And we were fortunate enough to be able to convince this organization that we were the right organization to continue their growth. They also have a site located just outside of Milan, Italy. And we're looking to expand on that site as we are launching a commercial operation based on a global expansion at this point in time. So very excited about seeing what the opportunities there. Our number one challenge on all aspects of the business, whether it's here in Kansas, the Philadelphia area, or in Milan, is really keeping up with the demands for talent that we're going to need over the next few years. Breaking that down, when we start to think about how we're positioned, this actually does map out pretty much everything that we're doing, even though right now we kind of got it set up as a FlowMetric here. I just left the logo here. But for the most part, this maps out really the areas in the overall pipelines, if you will, of the different types of therapeutic areas that we're working in. So these numbers fluctuate occasionally, but for the most part, this maps up pretty well with the work in the areas that we're focusing. So you can see everything from late discovery pretty much through all clinical work. We have a significant amount of oncology development going on. More than half of our work is in the clinical. That number's actually increased to a little over 60-some%. Again, that's by revenue at this point. By projects, we probably have about 50-50, maybe a little bit more in the preclinical. They're just simply smaller projects. But overall, this is kind of how we map out when it comes to the therapeutic areas and development stages. I mentioned the market earlier. The market is the bioanalytical market is what we're focused on here, is growing rapidly. Obviously, that just simply correlates with the amount of investments happening. If there was one silver lining to the COVID scenario for us as a business, is when travel and leisure and all those things were being looked at and shut down, investors said, okay, where are we going to put our money going forward? And one of those areas that made that incredibly robust was the biotech industry, as a lot of people started to become more educated about the opportunities and what's going on, and how the pharmaceutical and biotech industry play an incredible role and help us deal with things like COVID. They become more educated, and a lot of that investment moved over to this early development arena. And because of that, there was a lot more funding going into a lot of these biotech companies. And obviously, these companies outsource. They don't tend to build bricks and mortar, buy equipment. They go buy the expertise. So we, along with the other aspects of the CRO industry, have benefited from that greatly. And so as we see the global R&D pipeline size, we see it growing rather rapidly. And between the biological, non-biological drugs, we're well positioned to take on all growth in these areas, no matter what the category of that molecule is. Our eventual goal is to really kind of become that global provider and take advantage of that. Today, there is a little bit of a glass ceiling on KCS, as we were pretty much focused here nationally. And really, a lot of these clinical trials, as they develop and grow today, most of these larger organizations are looking for a global provider where they can anticipate and expect to get the same type of technologies provided to them when it comes to the bioanalytical needs that they have for a global trials. They simply do not want to box up these incredibly expensive samples that have been collected from an ongoing clinical trial and risk them, coming across the pond, if you will, and then being shipped and driven to Kansas City or any other place in the States for even our competitors. So having sites throughout the EU and in US and maybe even Asia Pacific is possibly an opportunity for us as well. We're looking to become one of those providers that can check that box, and that's we know that will open up more doors for us to grow as a company and truly become a global offering to many of these larger programs that are out there today. And so as these opportunities continue to grow, the pipelines continue to grow, the investments have been quite high in these areas. And not only that, industry continues ever so slightly, but always continues, the percent of the actual R&D for the bioanalytical work, even within the available amount of work, continues to increase as well. So pretty much all the needles are pointing in the right direction to be in this space at this time and be able to support the industry in the way that we can. So where are we going? We talked about the history, just kind of taking that first timeline and really boiling it down to this. Again, I joined the organization in 2016, been very blessed and very fortunate to be able to attract a team and, be on the same page with our mission and goals. And, we always talk about going down the road 90 miles per hour with our hair on fire, and it seems like everybody likes that. And so we work hard, play hard, and have a great time, but we take the work very, very seriously. So we are going through a rapid growth at this point in time, and my job is to stay out in front of that. Obviously, one of the things to stay out in front of that growth, though, is to have the capital, the support from your investment partners. So last year in 2021, I did work with the current investors at that time to say it is time for us to go, for lack of a better word, find that type of investor that can help us move within the opportunity that we have in front of us. So I worked with several investors, and we ended up selecting Vitruvian Partners based out of London. And that's been a great run. In fact, our anniversary was April 9th that they've been our major investor, and I don't think we could be happier. And at this point in time, I'm proud to say we're well ahead of plan. So right now we have happy investors. But with that in mind, I do believe that we picked the right partner in this case, really help us move through this opportunity as we continue to grow and scale the business and really truly become a transatlantic leader, if you will. That's the word we're referring to it, and how we're supporting the bioanalytical opportunities that are out there. Quickly talk about the expansion. Somewhere along the way, we'll be having open house. So if you happen to be up this way, stop by. There'll be plenty to eat and drink here, but we're probably going to have an intimate one with the employees and get them all psyched up about the move. But once we'll probably have an open house, probably more likely in September when weather permits, and probably a little more desirable than jumping in, say, in the middle of August or something like that. But kind of gives you a quick snapshot of the current facility located up off Shawnee Mission Parkway. And again, kind of a rendering of where we're at. And believe it or not, it looks almost exactly like that, except for the funny looking cars. But if you happen to be in the area and you're on the west side of the metro and you happen to be out there, if you happen to know where the K-State Olathe campus is, we're literally just due north of that, right by the just north of the KVA building at this point in time. So if you're in the area, let me know. Be happy to take you on a quick tour of the facility. I mentioned Vitruvian. Should have the slides tucked in together. Sorry, they're a little bit out of order here. Today, Vitruvian has all the resources and capital we could ever imagine. In fact, we're one of the smallest companies in their overall portfolio. Today, they have businesses, as indicated, throughout the world, as indicated by the orange dots, and we need to get one there in Kansas for that matter. And with that in mind, they have five major offices, one here in the US in San Francisco. But as you can see, they're predominantly in the EU, and have been a huge help in us starting to secure our interest strategically in the European region there, and been getting to know a lot more about the Europe than I ever wanted to here over the last 6 months. So looking forward to hopefully executing on that opportunity here in the coming months. And then our overall vision. Today, 2021, today we really have a North American footprint only. We call it that, even though we've got a site there in Milan. It's just simply not a site where we would say, or be able to go to our customers and say, look, we can provide our whole basket of services to you to really help you develop your drug globally. We hope to change that here in 2022, and then really set the stage for the organization to truly serve the industry in a global way. Our technologies, again, our mass spec, LBA technologies, and how we work through that does differentiate us at this point in time. And we see that through rapid expansion of programs, word of mouth, and just the ongoing opportunities that we have with our customer base. While a lot of CROs are also experiencing high demand, I think today, arguably, we're one of the fastest growing CROs out there, particularly in this space. Again, one of the focuses when I first came in was to make sure that we could cover and partner with our customers, and that we could provide the development services across that paradigm. The organization's strategy before was to only do GLP work and kind of avoid this work and then try to pick it back up. That's not the way drugs are developed. So the industry has pretty high expectations of CROs to truly be able to partner with them as they kind of move through their development needs. And really at this point in time, we have a large amount of small and mid-sized customers. Obviously, they have smaller pipelines. We do serve a lot of large customers as well, but we envision over time that over the next 5 years, that as we open up this transatlantic footprint, if you will, we'll be able to access a larger market. And that really opens us up to those opportunities with some of those larger entities that today we don't check that box of being a global provider. And we're validating that as we speak, as we actually have several folks from our commercial team starting to have those discussions with the industry, and they're quite open to really hearing our story, and have already asked us to start to let them know when that opportunity arrives, as they do anticipate needs for another entry, if you will, into the global environment in the bioanalytical space. So definitely a busy time here at KCAS, and folks here in Kansas, which is by far the mothership of the organization. But again, we look to bring a global perspective here to the organization, and hopefully we'll be able to update on that, and hopefully we'll be able to check those boxes as we continue to take advantage of the opportunities that's been given to us at this point in time. So again, really looking to build a brand that someday we would anticipate that, having a FlowMetric brand, a KCS brand, and if we are successful enough to acquire another company, we'll probably have to rethink calling it KCS, because today officially we are called KCS and not Kansas City Analytical Services. So that is definitely one of the things that we have to think about as our brand, particularly as we start to think about a global footprint moving forward. So overall, that's the story of KCS. Thank you for your time and patience in getting through this. Kelly, I'll turn it over to you now.
I had to find that unmute button. John, it struck me that, in the last decade or so, you've seen you've firsthand experienced the move of the marketplace from small molecule emphasis to large molecule emphasis, and even over the pandemic, MOBIO started to become engaged in conversations regarding reshoring of active pharmaceutical ingredients and essential medicines to make sure that baseline diseases we weren't held hostage by other countries, and that we had some semblance of being able to do that here. Do you have any concerns, or what do you see in that territory, or do you have any concerns about, or is so much of the large molecule just happening here from North America that's a distant problem?
No, I think, I mean, that's a real problem, right? There's the majority, while there's a lot of new large molecules that are coming on the market, and, getting the headlines, really the underpinning of our offering today in the pharmaceuticals in our pharmacies really are traditionally small molecules. So, I applauded that move. There was so much offshoring happening that it really did hamper a lot of particularly the manufacturing organizations. I've had that background previously at ABC Laboratories in the GMP space, and I've stayed connected with it. And a lot of these CDMOs have done quite well, arguably even better than at times, particularly from an investor standpoint, relative to even what we're doing. So with that in mind, you're seeing expansion in these areas. You're seeing a lot of those that have hung in there and done well, making significant investments to keep up. But, that quality of that work, I think there was also right about that time, there was still also quite a bit of fluff, if you will, still happening about the quality of the materials. And I think the COVID just put a magnifying glass on that. So I think that trend had already kind of started, because if it was all about price, we wouldn't be here in that regard. So I do think there's just that adage of, at the end of the day, these companies are looking for quality work that they can rely on, and so they can move at the speed that development will allow them to do that. Obviously, cost is important, but they simply cannot suffer concerns around the integrity of the data, intellectual property, and that simply had not been addressed. So, COVID again really allowed that opportunity to happen. For the large molecule, that big transition, though, if you're a major company, right, or a biotech company, it is more difficult. Those processes that derive those products get into development. We talk about biosimilars. We talk about generics. The reality is a lot of that strategy has moved into those areas simply because the generic companies or the biosimilar companies, it is much more difficult to replicate these biologics and to compete once those patents run out. So that is a major shift. And again, it's just a whole new technology out there. So again, now on the heels of the cell and gene therapy, kind of ramping up yet another new technology we have to work with. I think the paradigm for the industry of always worrying about, can we make money on this, even if we get an approved drug? How long is it before the generic companies come in and wipe out our share? I think that whole paradigm is really kind of changed, is fuzzier than it used to be. So I think there is more vested interest in companies for those with the biologics. At a minimum, they're getting the benefit of the doubt that their technology can serve them a lot longer than, say, maybe the traditional small molecule development entities.
Well, those large molecule biosimilars will have to not just follow the simple Betty Crocker baking recipe. They're going to have to prove out that they are equivalent in their efficacy, and because there's never going to be an exact biosimilar. It's going to be a bioequivalent that's right, close to and delivering the same type of results that doctor is seeking. As you've had this expansion and this growth phase that is truly impressive, you've had to have also been hit and pulled back somewhat a little bit by either supply chain or inflationary pressures. What's really given you the most angst the last couple of years, John, of to keep you from going even further faster?
It's a great question. Like everybody, obviously dealing with COVID, we were considered essential at that point, and so we continued our operations through COVID. Probably the biggest headache, at least during that period of time initially, was just nobody seemed to know what everybody was going to do. And so it really took a while for us to engage with our clients, let them know, hey, we're still in operations here in Kansas. We didn't suffer much through 2020. In fact, once people found out we were moving forward and seemed to be handling, I guess, better than most of our peers in the industry, we had record backlogs, record months, record revenue months. Obviously, we had to deal with COVID and some of the impacts that it did upon our operations staff, but in my mind, our team was heroes in really the way they handled it and moved forward. The supply chain, it was probably the biggest headache. The amount of logistics, reliability of the information coming from vendors relying on their vendors and manufacturers to provide the materials, it literally became exhausting to keep up with the logistics, the unreliability of that information. From the desk of the CEO, writing letters to certain manufacturers to say, hey, look, this particular drug we're working on right now is in compassionate use, and if you can't provide us something as simple as pipette tips, literally people are going to die because we can't release the materials that the FDA is required to get it to them in compassionate use. And so anything and everything through that process was fair game to do what we needed to do to try to keep the business obviously with integrity. And not breaking the law, but we've been known to drive 500 miles to pick up pipette tips, just so we could keep that going, keep the clients viable, and using our local networks with some of the folks here in MOBIO and saying, hey, do you happen to have it? Yeah, we have some of these sitting on the shelf. And so the supply chains are still definitely a challenge. They do seem to be a little more reliable today, although there are still hiccups in the supply chain line. There's just become reality now, and everybody's kind of used as, for lack of a better word, come to accept it. We've had to more than double our purchasing and logistics department to even begin to keep up with the needs and the variability and tracking of those materials. So it's a real problem. Obviously, inflation is causing an issue. Obviously, we have little choice but to continue to support our teams here with the increasing costs of the business, and obviously adjusting our teams' salaries to compensate them. We have to pass that on to our clients, and for the most part, our clients were fully expecting it. Right, it's no secret that inflation's a real challenge for everybody in the industry right now. But for the most part, we are looking at doing everything we can to be as efficient as we can, making investments to become more efficient, so that we can pass some of those efficiencies on while definitely taking care of our staff and continue to grow the business.
As you put up that new structure that you're about to pack up your boxes and move into, what changes in the last couple of years have you made with COVID in the background to redesign your restaurant to get rid of the play places and the general dining?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Kelly. Yeah, there in the facilities before, you would typically tend to bring some of those areas like eateries together. In our new facility, they're much smaller, but they're located throughout the building, so they're kind of more of a zone type approach in that regard, and the team seemed to be pretty receptive to that. I mean, obviously it still makes and go, but the idea is to kind of keep them separated and not have near as much exposure by doing that. And we've done the similar things with our seating throughout the organization. So it's a very, I wouldn't say that it's not a complicated design by all, but mainly just more breaking those regions up where before you could get synergies and reduce your costs by putting all that together. But the most expensive thing we have is if we have people out, they're ill, or we lose capacity. from our scientists not being, say, here for 5 or 6 weeks. We had 1 month where we had 15 of our technical stuff out at once, and as you can imagine, that put a pretty big damper on getting things out that month for our clients. So yeah, it doesn't take 1 or 2 of those instances for you to start to say, hey, what can we do in helping this whole process out in this regard. So yeah, a lot of different seating arrangements as well, even within those pods, and some of the new technology on furniture are starting to incorporate that. It looks very innocent. You don't think about it until somebody points it out. So hopefully we've caught that just right. Not overboard where we can't maintain the business, but definitely keeping our staff in mind as we change the design of that facility at least 3 or 4 times during that process.
Do you have that that little scientific revolt that occurs when people aren't able to take their mass spec home with them, when the sales crews and your back office teams are able to hybrid work from home and flex, and those other folks feel compelled that they have to be there in the lab?
Yeah, there was definitely some of that, right? Everybody's gone through the great resignation, whatever they call it, when people are thinking about, or we've had staff work from home, and now they're saying, if I have to come back into the site, I just don't want to. I'm scared to. We've done everything we can to keep those that can truly work from home and be productive working at home, but we've also doubled down on the folks that are at site to really make it to make it desirable for them to want to come into the site. So everything from creature comforts to more interaction to heavy lifting on the training. But I think all in all, the scientists, in the big scheme of things, one, they realize they can't just take the mass spec home, but at the same time too, they also have a really keen understanding of what they're doing, right? We are always out in front of them saying, you don't know who they are, but somebody out there today is counting on this assay to potentially become that new drug. You'll never meet them, unlikely, but somebody out there somewhere today, somebody's family member that they don't even know, a disease they don't have yet, is counting on you in the work that you're doing today. And once people get their head around that, and we've had some incredible successes. It's public information. We were the Bioanalytical lab of choice for Trvaldi, which is one of the new innovative drugs for triple negative breast cancer, which there was really no solution for. So Gilead's drug now, which bought from the biotech company that we helped hold their hand through the development process. We take a lot of pride in that. We really guided that company to that point. And the team got to see the evening news when this thing was coming out in the publications, and when the FDA granted compassionate use based on the programs that KCAS developed to help them get through that development program. It was, we bragged about it, like we helped save lives that maybe wouldn't have been done if we hadn't been involved. So doesn't take much of that to get you out of bed early in the morning and come to work enthused about what you do.
Absolutely, that's great reference, and certainly very understandable and a smart way to communicate that. John, your most recent business negotiation was with, is Vitruvian a private equity firm?
They are.
And previously, like with ABC Labs, it was selling to a larger company. What were the differences that you encountered, and were there other larger private companies, or had you narrowed it down to we only want to work with private equity firms this time?
Yeah, in this case with so we refer to, if it's a company, whether they're backed by a PE or not, we refer to those as strategic. So I'll use, when I throw that term around for reference. In this case, we knew that with our growth rate, where we were at and the market, the way it was, that we were going to attract a lot of private equity groups. And we had a committed and dedicated team to move forward. And so if you imagine yourself being a private equity investor who's maybe researched the space but doesn't understand these technologies, that's what you're looking for, right? You're looking for a dedicated, focused team that understands what they're doing, that's working in a market that's growing. Because again, a private equity investor, really the only way they can make money is if you're growing. If they make an investment at X level and you don't get to X plus Y level, they lose the opportunity on the Y part, right? So the strategists can come in and revamp or add a technology or add your technology to theirs and kind of round out and then look at cost reductions. So usually very different strategies in that regard. But we were at that point in time and continue to be very much check all the boxes for interest in a private equity market. At that unlike today where the rates are starting to go up. Access to money and how you engineer the financial aspects of the investments is going to become much more complicated. We're seeing that pullback right now in the markets for the biotech companies. That's true probably in the private equity companies as well, as they look out and say, well, we've got a 5-6 year window. What does that look like? But for us, again, at the rate we were growing, the speed we were growing, the success we were having, the customers, the low turnover, we had a plan, a vision. The building was already coming out of the ground, so we checked a lot of boxes for the private equity markets, and quite frankly had a tremendous amount of interest in that grade. And through that process, we selected Vitruvian.